So a kid had wrote in a DM that I still haven't actually got to answer, but we'll answer it here, and then I'll answer him there. Um, and he's kind of talking about setting himself up to get to these higher levels. So he's a AAA player, and he has a question kind of about switching teams in that ballpark, and I think that'll lead us into our topic a little bit later on. So I don't know if you want to set the question up and then go into an answer, because I know you read it, so you probably have a better
I
idea.
like to keep a short story long, or
Yeah.
the opposite. Is he's a youth? He's going into second year Bantam, and obviously a pretty good player. He's playing at the AAA level, way out of town.
WU15 for all of you.
Going into U15, and so he asked a question. He said he played on a third place team. He was offered a spot on a first place team in that league,
Mhm.
and they're going to have billets for him, like they got that set up. And he said, so he goes, I know it's up to me, but what should I do? Right?
Yep, that was the question.
So that would be moving about 2 hours away from home at 15 to play at the same level. Right?
So just a couple things to set up. So this would be a 14-year-old making a decision like this, and keep in mind, like, if the OHL is a goal that you have, or something that you're like, because most youth hockey players that's in Ontario, that's what they're looking at. That's only 2 years away. So he has 2 seasons, 1 season until his draft year is coming up. So he's got his U15 year, and then his draft year is right there. So now it's like starting to get serious, because this is the kind of the age we always talk about, that 13, 14 is when things actually start to get pretty real. So yeah, weighing the options on whether he should make a jump to a first place team or stay on his team, and kind of the factors that go into that. So kind of what were your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that we got a lot of questions about people in the United States of America that they live a little bit more remotely, and they look at maybe going to a place almost across the country. What do you think of that? And I mean, there's circumstances for everything, but like in a simple situation like that we have in Ontario, like let's be real, Ontario is pretty hockey rich. I'm not talking, well, we're talking money too, but there's a lot of places to play, and being on a third place team is not bad, because if you're truly the guy, or if you want to be the guy, like, then you got to help that team be a second or first place team. That'd be my first thing, as I would say. But what I would say, like, okay, so first of all, you get a call or you get an invite like that, and my first question when you get those calls is number one, it could be a compliment. Obviously, that's a compliment. We want you, and we want to move you, and we're going to put you up in a place. And I mean, it's a compliment. I guess you kind of feel good about it. And it always sounds like it's going to be better. The next thing that goes through my mind is, what's in it for them, the people that are asking. So, like, for me, and maybe I'm too, I don't know if it's old school or whatever, but it's like, what you're asking a kid to move away at 14 years old. Like, I don't know if that's like 2 hours away for a team that's not much better.
Can I just stick that for 1 second?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of that. I've never really thought of that. Like, the dynamic of a adult saying to a kid, hey, I'm going to move you away from your house to come and play for us because that's what's best for you, or whatever. If that's the perspective being offered, that's kind of a weird dynamic. I've never really thought of that. Like, you're saying to a 14-year-old, I'm going to pull you out of your house to come play here. Not that it's always bad necessarily, but just that it's kind of a weird thing.
Especially when you're far enough away to move.
Yeah, right.
But cost your parents a ton just to go to your games and practices. Like, it's an issue. But like,
yeah,
like for my thing there, like, as a parent, I'd be like, okay, this better be so unreal, like, or my situation must be terribly bad for me to do that, because number one, who wants their kid to move away at 14 without any real, like, you're not Connor Bedard, Connor McDavid type of status where it's like, yeah, we got to get going somewhere, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So, but like, from an adult asking that, it's like, okay, what's in it for you? And I see this happening at younger ages. It's like, you don't have to move, man. Like, you don't have to move. And I'm not saying it to this kid, like, don't be stupid. I'm just saying, like, you don't have to move. Like, like, trust me on this. The team, and told me the team that he plays for, it's a very good organization. So, so you stay there, man. You stay there. And you play with your friends, and you go to school, and you live with your parents, and you try to make that team better. That's my advice, unless there's something dramatically different than that.
Yeah, I think to your first point that you said is there's circumstances that matter. And I think just maybe if we can generalize it kind of to anyone who's in a similar situation, the basic questions you're asking yourself are, how is my current situation? Like, is it a situation you need to leave?
Yeah.
That's number one.
And
You
those
know?
situations to me are dramatic.
Yeah. And they do happen,
Hmm.
but that's number one. So because the grass isn't always greener, sometimes people put a sweet deal on the table, but you don't really know all the ins and outs until you're there. So that's number one. Then number two is, what's the situation you're going into? Because people can say whatever they want when they offer you whatever the deal is. But like I said, until you're there, they need to be able to explain to you what is the benefit to you. And then the other thing is, if you're on a weaker team and you're a better player, and then you hop on, we say this all the time, you hop onto a better team and maybe you're not now, maybe you get less opportunity. So my thing, because people, this is a pretty common question people ask about switching teams. And the two things I always say to them the two things I always say are, what's your situation like? And what kind of opportunity are you getting in the place that you go? And that's putting other variables aside, like, can you afford to do this? Like, how much money does it cost? What are the other variables in your life that would make this good or bad? Just from a hockey perspective, those are the two questions: your current situation and what's the situation you're going into, what kind of opportunity you're going to get. Those are kind of the questions that you need to answer. And so for this guy, it's, if you don't have a serious issue with the team that you're on, like, lots of scouts look at your team, man. Like,
Oh,
lots of scouts
the
are in that
organization
area.
plucks a lot of
Yeah,
players out of
right.
there.
So it's like, what's the benefit of moving if it's not, you're not in a bad situation
Hmm.
necessarily? Just because the other team's a first place team, that's not necessarily better for you
Well, in
and
their
your
first place
development.
last year.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right.
So people are just real quick to do that. Think like, and I've made this point before. It's easy to say, if I had this, if I had this, if I had this, or if I was there, or if, then it would all be better. And it's not necessarily true. It's easy to play that game and say, well, yeah, if I had what he had, or if I had, and you don't even know if you had the same thing that somebody else had, maybe it wouldn't be as good, maybe it wouldn't work, or whatever. You don't know. So it's just, you have to be very careful and actually weigh the options before you make
Yeah.
make a decision like that.
Yeah. I remember having a couple. Well, more often than not, but many coaches, across the river or up the 401, saying, "Hey, Andy, can you talk to this kid? I want to get him on my team." And then da 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 da, and they're like selling me. It's like, man, you're selling me to sell a kid and the family to have their kid move out. It's like, and I know that, and there's a couple of them. Like, I wouldn't let my kid go anywhere near you. It's like all you care about is having the best team, not necessarily the development, right? And I've seen these guys, but anyways, the other side of it is, when I see people moving away, not all the time, but many times, usually might not be the word, but heavily weighted, that a lot of these people that move away from their home centers are the problem. The dad can't figure out how this every organization's a bunch of idiots, right? All these people don't know what they're doing. There's never a good coach. There's never this, and they're ones that are bringing their kids across to another team or whatever. And it's like, but you're the problem.
Well, there's a term for that. You're called a suitcase player, right? And that's the term in the hockey lingo. People call you a suitcase if you're jumping around team to team to team, because it's actually you. That's the issue. And I played with so many guys like that they'd be on our team for 2 months and then on the next team and then on the next team, because there's always a problem wherever they go. So it's like, maybe you're the problem. That's a good point. But the other thing I want to say too about for parents too, but for players that haven't moved away before, and I guess for parents too that haven't experienced somebody moving away, like, it is really hard to move away, man. Like, when you're young too, as a grown up, it's different. But when you're a kid and you still have that developing brain, like, moving away it's not an easy thing to do, because it's not just about hockey. That's the problem, right? If you're just going to practice and play a game and then everything's fine, that's not all there is. You're not sleeping in your bed. You're living with strangers. You have to reestablish your friend group. You're switching schools. You're totally out of everything that is normal to you. And if you're not a very particular kind of personality, or a very particular, or you're particularly prepared for that situation, a lot of kids don't handle it very well. Like, I was telling a story last week. We had a workout with a bunch of the junior kids that were in here, and they were asking me about, like, what happened with me when I played, and I was telling them one of my stories from when I was away. And a kid that plays junior had a good year last year. He said to me, "Hey," he's like, "Man, if that would have happened to me, I would have called my mom right away. I'm done." He's like, "There's no chance I would have sat through that. No chance." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, like, it's tough. You think it sounds sexy. I'm gonna move away and play for this team. It sounds cool, but there's real life that happens attached to moving away,
And
So
it's a lot better when things are going perfect.
well, for
It makes it
sure.
a lot better, but
Yeah,
when
for
things are
sure.
not going perfect, that's where it's very, very, very hard.
Yeah. So
Very hard.
those are the things that you want to
Yeah.
keep in mind when
But
those
I
decisions
would look
happen.
at, like, like, just as we're on this topic, I would look at, like, this. Remember I said earlier in this podcast that how hard getting to the next levels are. So again, the moving away and and even like everything that goes into the intensity of the parents and the it's like it's so important to make these huge decisions. And it's like, if you're actually being realistic, where do you actually fit in this going to play, make money at hockey life? So like a lot of the times that's where I sit there and I really struggle with it. For I don't struggle with it, but I shake my head and go, for an adult to do this with their kids, it's like, okay, but why are you doing this? Because are you betting on the fact that you're going to be on a better team, therefore your kid is just going to be a good player and make some money or get his school paid for? Because he has to be really, 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 really good and tough it out for a long period of time. That's why, you know, yesterday at the end of a season, you look at kids and they're going, now what? Yeah, you're a really high draft pick, and it's nothing against you. You just it's you couldn't foresee that. When you were 13 or 14, you thought for sure you were going to be the next one, not the next one, but you were going to be in that top 1 or 2% because you always were. But things change, and it's like, if you're making these decisions and your kids or your family look at the player and you go like, hey, he's okay. Well, that's to me, it's not worth the move. It's not worth the move at all. It's you'd have to be like head and shoulders above everybody ever play with or play against to come to the conclusion that, yeah, maybe it's a good idea to go and play under the best coach or the
Yeah, and I
whatever
think
system.
it comes back to like the philosophy that I think both of us share is that we talked about last week. If you're good enough, people are going to find you wherever you play.
Well, that's the thing.
So if you don't subscribe to that philosophy, then I don't know what to tell you. But because we think that, and it seems to be true from our experience, like it doesn't matter where you play, man. As long as if you're good, you're good. And we're gonna see in 10 days another example of that happening. So